She doesn't even own a suit, my mother-in-law said, loudly enough that 3 people turned to look at me. What does she actually do again? Something with computers. I was standing 6 feet away, holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched, watching my husband's face do that thing it always does when his mother says something awful. A slight tightening around the eyes, then nothing. A smooth return to normal. Like he'd decided years ago that the cost of saying something wasn't worth it. I smiled and looked out the window at the backyard, where my father-in-law was firing up the grill, and my husband's younger sister was chasing her kid around the oak tree. It was a Sunday in late October, the kind where the air smells like wood smoke and dying leaves, and somewhere in another part of the house, a football game was playing that no one was actually watching. I had driven 4 hours to be here. I had taken Monday off work. I was wearing the one nice blouse I own that doesn't have a government agency embroidered on the chest. Something with computers, I said, mostly to myself. My name is Nadia. I'm 31 years old. For the past 6 years, I have been a special agent with the FBI's Cyber Division, stationed out of the Charlotte field office. I investigate ransomware attacks, infrastructure breaches, and financial crimes that move through the dark web faster than most people can spell cryptocurrency. I have testified before a federal grand jury. I have worked cases that ended with people going to prison for 20 years. Last spring, I was part of a joint task force with the Secret Service that dismantled a network responsible for stealing $43 million from community banks across 7 states. My mother-in-law thinks I work in IT. My husband, whose name is Grant, told his family early on that I worked for a federal agency in a sensitive capacity, and that I couldn't discuss details. His mother heard sensitive and decided I was probably a low-level bureaucrat who processed paperwork and was embarrassed about it. His father heard federal and assumed I worked for the post office. His sister, who is actually kind and sharp, and the only one in that family I genuinely like, figured out pretty quickly that I wasn't going to talk about it and stopped asking. The rest of them just filled in the blank with whatever made me seem smallest. Grant married a little late, his mother told someone at their church, apparently. His wife is very quiet. She works a desk job somewhere. Very stable. Nothing exciting. Nothing exciting. I'd been sitting with that for 2 years. Grant and I met at a coffee shop in Charlotte. He was a structural engineer, the kind of steady, methodical person who thinks through every problem before he speaks, which I found deeply attractive after years of working with people who operated purely on adrenaline. We dated for 14 months and then got married in a small ceremony with 20 people in my mother's backyard in Asheville. His family came. They were polite. His mother gave me a hug at the reception that lasted approximately 1 second. That was fine. I didn't need her to love me. What I hadn't expected was the slow accumulation of small moments, the way she'd ask Grant at dinner, right in front of me, whether he was happy with how things were going, financially, as though I wasn't contributing. The comment at Christmas about how it was a shame I didn't have a real career, where I could move up. The way she introduced me to her friends as Grant's wife, without any other detail, while she introduced Grant's brother's wife, who was an orthodontist, as the doctor in the family. None of it was screamed. None of it left a bruise you could point to. It was the drip, drip, drip of water on stone. That October Sunday, we were there for what his family called the Fall Gathering, a semi-annual tradition, where Grant's parents hosted his mother's side of the family at their house in Raleigh. Cousins, aunts, uncles, a few family friends. Maybe 30 people total. His mother had made her famous pecan pie and spent the morning telling everyone who would listen how much effort it took. I was tasked with bringing something easy, which I interpreted as the good bread from the bakery near our house and 2 bottles of wine. His mother looked at the bread like I'd brought a bag of gas station sandwiches. By 2 in the afternoon, I had been asked 3 times what I did for work, given 3 different vague answers, and watched all 3 people lose interest and move on. I'd had a 15-minute conversation with Grant's uncle about the structural integrity of modern highway overpasses, which was genuinely interesting. I'd helped his cousin's 7-year-old build a fort out of couch cushions in the living room. I was doing fine. I was being fine. Then Grant's mother gathered a small group of family near the kitchen island. His aunt, 2 cousins, a neighbor who'd been coming to these gatherings for years, and I heard her say in that voice she uses when she thinks she's being quiet but isn't, "She's very sweet, but I'll be honest, I worry about Grant, sometimes. She doesn't have ambition, you know? She's content just no drive, no drive." I set down my wine glass on the bookshelf, next to me very carefully, the way I set things down when I'm working very hard not to react. And I looked at the oak tree out the window, and I thought about the case I had left on my desk on Friday afternoon. 7 months earlier, a regional bank in Winston-Salem had reported an anomaly in their transaction logs. Withdrawals that were too small to trigger automatic flags, too random to look like a pattern to the human eye, but not random at all when you fed them through the right model. Someone had gotten in. Not through the front door, through a vendor's back-end access portal. Through a third-party payroll company that serviced the bank and 14 other financial institutions in the Southeast. The case landed on my desk because it had the fingerprints of a group we'd been tracking for 2 years. Eastern European, sophisticated, patient. They didn't rush. They sat inside a system for months before they took anything, learning the rhythms, mapping the blind spots. I had been working that case for 4 months when the Sunday in Raleigh happened. My team had traced the money through 6 shell companies, 3 different countries, and 2 cryptocurrency exchanges. We had a warrant. We had a cooperating witness. We were 3 weeks from arrests. I knew all of that when his mother said I had no drive. I didn't say any of it. I went and refilled my wine glass and came back and talked to Grant's sister about her daughter's upcoming school play. The arrests happened on a Thursday, 3 weeks later, in the early morning hours. I was part of the team at the command post outside Charlotte while coordinating with agents in Tampa, Baltimore, and Atlanta hitting locations simultaneously. We took into custody 8 individuals connected to the network, including 2 who were operating out of a business front in a strip mall off I-405 that sold used electronics and smelled like motor oil. The Bureau issued a press release that afternoon. It mentioned the FBI's cyber division. It mentioned the joint operation with the Secret Service and the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. It mentioned the total amount recovered. $38 million. It did not mention my name because these things rarely do. But the story got picked up. Regional news first, then national. By Friday morning it was on 3 cable networks. The U.S. Attorney held a press conference, and standing 2 rows back, in a dark blazer with my credentials around my neck, visible for approximately 4 seconds of footage, was me. I didn't know about the footage until my mother called. "Sweetheart," she said, and I could hear that she'd been crying, which scared me for a second before I realized it was the good kind. "I just saw you on the news. You were standing right there. Are you okay? Are you safe?" I told her I was safe. I told her the case was closed and I was fine and I was actually about to get a very good night's sleep for the first time in a month. She cried a little more and then told me she was proud of me and that she'd recorded it on her phone and was going to make my aunt watch it. Grant called 20 minutes later. "My mother just texted me," he said. There was a pause. "She saw it," I said. "Half the family saw it. My cousin sent the clip to the family group chat." Another pause. "My mother is calling me right now, can I?" "Go ahead." He called back 40 minutes later. I was in my car in the parking garage under our building, eating a gas station sandwich because I'd forgotten to pack lunch for 3 days running, and my body had finally issued a formal complaint. "She wants to know if you can come to dinner on Saturday," Grant said. "What did she say when she called you?" He was quiet for a moment. Grant is someone who chooses his words like he's load-bearing. Like the wrong one will bring something down. "She said she didn't realize." That's the phrase she used. "She didn't realize." "What did you say?" I said there were probably a lot of things she didn't realize. I looked at my sandwich, then out the windshield at the concrete wall of the parking garage, then up at the water-stained ceiling. "Okay," I said. "Saturday." The dinner was at their house in Raleigh again. Just the 4 of us this time. Me, Grant, his parents. His mother had made pot roast, which took most of the day based on the way she mentioned it twice before we'd gotten our coats off. The table was set with the good dishes, which I'd only seen once before, At Easter. I sat across from her and thought about how to do this. What version of me to bring? She started talking almost immediately after we sat down, while she was serving the pot roast, not quite looking at me. The tone was different. The air in the room was different in a way that was hard to describe. Thicker, maybe, like everyone was being careful about where they put their feet. I saw the segment on Friday, she said. The press conference, I know. Grant mentioned. You were right there. In the back, I was. She put a serving of pot roast on her own plate. Set the serving fork down very deliberately. I didn't know what you did. I knew you worked for. I knew it was government work. I just didn't know. I waited. I said some things, she said. At the gathering in October, you might have heard, or you might not have, a beat about ambition. There it was. I heard, I said. Her husband's Grant's father was looking very steadily at his water glass. Grant had his hand flat on the table next to his fork, very still. I was wrong, she said. It came out evenly, not dramatically. No fanfare, just the words, placed on the table between us like something she'd been carrying a long way. I made assumptions about you that I didn't have the right to make, and I was wrong. I had thought about this moment. In the parking garage eating my sandwich, I had thought about what I would want from her. What would actually mean something? Thank you for saying that, I said. And then, there are things I can't tell you about what I do. That's not going to change. But I'm not going to pretend the October thing didn't happen either. I'd rather we just both know that it did. She nodded, once firmly like she was signing something. We ate the pot roast. It was very good. I told her so and meant it. The conversation shifted. To Grant's current project. To the school play his sister's daughter was in. To the fact that his father was thinking about retiring in 2 years and didn't know what to do with himself. By the time we got to dessert, something had loosened, just slightly. Not fixed, not erased. But different. On the drive home, Grant reached over and put his hand on mine on the center console. You okay? Yeah, I said. You, yeah? A mile of highway in the dark. She called me Wednesday before Saturday to ask what she should say to you. I looked at him. What did you tell her? I told her to just tell the truth and not overthink it. He paused. I also told her that you've been underestimated your entire marriage into this family, and that the appropriate response to realizing that wasn't a pot roast dinner. What was the appropriate response? He thought about it. Probably something she doesn't know how to do yet, but that the pot roast was a start. I laughed. Actual laugh, the kind that loosens something in your chest. I hadn't laughed like that in about a month. The next day I went back to work. There was a new case on my desk, a phishing scheme targeting hospital systems in 3 states. Ugly and spreading. I made coffee. I sat down. I got to work. My mother-in-law texts me now sometimes. Not often. She sent me an article about a cybercrime bill moving through the Senate, with no message attached, just the link. I texted back a thumbs up and then stared at my phone for a second, because I wasn't sure what she expected me to do with it. But she sent it. That's the thing. She went looking for something in my world and she sent it. I think about the version of me standing in her kitchen in October, holding a glass of water and hearing the words, "No drive." I think about how I smiled and looked out at the oak tree and said nothing, because I had learned, from years of working cases where silence is an asset, where patience is the job, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait. I waited. And then $38 million came home, and 4 seconds of footage on a Friday afternoon news segment did more than anything I could have said over 100 Sunday dinners. I still don't own a suit. I wear blazers from a rack at Nordstrom Rack and sensible shoes I can run in if I have to. My credentials are on a lanyard that I forget to take off sometimes when I pick up lunch. I am not what she pictured when her son brought me home. I'm something she didn't have a category for, and I think slowly she's starting to build one. That's enough. For now, that's enough.